It's my first post here, and this just happened about an hour ago, so my memory is pretty fresh. First off, I'm living very rural in a small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, it just takes you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. First Christmas Day, in the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk as we're really stuffed from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we left, and we had a big and bright LED flashlight with us. I also took my camera and my flash, as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small graveled cycle track close to the forest border, which connects our village and the next, maybe 15 to 20 minutes walk between villages. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the track, which is close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed the light inside of the car, and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed that the windows were frozen, so it must have been parking there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure. I asked my partner to point the flashlight towards it, so I could focus better and photograph it with my flash. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing behind us in the middle of the road, and he's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way, and I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening and close to the border of the forest, there are boars sometimes, and it's mating season, so they are more aggressive than usual. But indeed, there was a man standing behind us, staying out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. It was not even legal to drive on that path with a car. So I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and still just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that this wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for this behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to just get the fuck out and follow the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes until we reached it. I remembered the letters on his license plate, not the numbers though, unfortunately, and I googled it, and it turned out that he was from a city about 6 hours away from our village. Mind you, the country that I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you are only allowed to travel, even by car, if you have very urgent reasons. After we reached the first lantern of the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he parked there again and turned the lights off, and he didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then. But I called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details, which is a big regret that I didn't memorize the whole license plate. But It was just so surprising that I seriously didn't think about it. Also, it only occurred to me as really strange when I thought about the frozen windows and that he couldn't possibly have walked behind us. Plus, him having no light and not responding. He did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. So, creepy guy sneaking around the forest, let's not meet.
2 stories while working with children. Hey everybody, sorry for the English, I tried my best. I thought a long time before posting my story here, or rather 2 that happened to me and one of my colleagues. It's not something scary, but rather something very uncomfortable, and my friends told me it would fit in here. Let's get started. Both stories happened in the summer of 2018, when I was working as a facilitator in a recreation center for children, small sections up to 1st grade. We were in a kind of park about 20 minutes away by bus, where we stayed all day before going back to school at about 5 p.m. so that the parents could pick up their children. This park was reserved for us and therefore nobody else than us. Our managers and those who take care of the canteen are not supposed to be there, especially since around here there are only fields, a forest, and a building site, but it was quite far. Now that the context has been set, I begin my first story that happened to my colleague. We had walkie-talkies for the day, which allowed us to reach our managers, the secretary, or the infirmary in case of a problem, but they were returned when it was time to leave to be recharged during the night. So it was up to the secretary, my colleague, who was the last one to leave around 7 p.m. to put them on charge and then close the shutters and doors and go home. One morning, I think it was the 8th day, I had been working for a month with the children. We all find ourselves summoned one by one to the office of our leaders. So I go there without really understanding what is going on. I pass in front of the secretary, who doesn't look serene at all, and that worries me a bit. My senior manager asks me if I returned my walkie the day before, or if I knew if someone had taken one. I say that I did return mine by pointing at it in the charging station, and I explain that I didn't hear anything else. I still ask why I'm being asked this question, and then my manager tells me. The night before at 7 p.m., as she was about to leave, my colleague was closing the shutters when one of the walkie-talkies lit up, and a male voice came out saying, "Hey, beauty of the aisles, you're beautiful when you close those shutters." I had a vile shiver go down my spine. My colleague being the only foreigner on the team, the person who spoke to her had to be looking at her and really talking to her and not a hoax. At that time, she had called her roommate, who had come to pick her up and left every other day with someone. We never heard from that guy again. Nevertheless, we patrolled for several days to try to notice someone for our safety, but especially for the children's safety. The second story takes place in the 3rd and thus the penultimate week of work. It is around 11 a.m. when I am called on the talkie by my manager. She tells me that something very strange has just happened. I ask her what it is, and again I could feel this shiver of anguish. A man had come to the secretary and asked to see me. To see me, using my first and last name. My manager had gone to see me because she thought it was strange. Because nobody is supposed to show up at my workplace, and apart from my parents and friends, nobody knew I was there. This man had then introduced himself as my uncle and said that he had come to pick me up for personal reasons. My manager said that I was not on the site. That was not true. And that she would let me know that he had come by. According to her, he looked very annoyed and left without giving his name. You could say it was a plausible story, but I only have one uncle, who is my godfather, who doesn't fit the description of the man who came, and to whom I don't talk at all. Again, I have never heard from this man again, and have never seen him. but I still have this bad feeling that someone I don't know forged an identity to come and get me. Who knows what would have happened if I had gone? I am grateful to my manager who knew how to smell the trouble. This was a bit long, maybe not very interesting, but it makes me feel good to talk about it. Take care of yourselves. Bye, everybody.
This happened 4 years ago. I'm a girl, and at that time this happened, I was 12 years old, going on 13, in just a month or two. The friend that I mentioned in this story was 14 at that time. The friend, Sally, who I was staying with that night, was 14 and also a female. She was quite a bit older than me. At least at the time, the 2-year age gap was quite big. At 12 to 13 years old, I was about to start my second year of middle school, whereas Sally should have been about to begin her sophomore year of high school. I met her in the beginning of my first year at a new school. She was older than the other kids in our grade and was considered one of the popular kids. And I think that was what drew me to her at first. We became fast friends, and before we knew it, we were spending every single weekend together. Seriously, like every single weekend. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It was your typical Friday night. We carpooled to her family's apartment after school. Well, I've always been a picky eater, so when her family had dinner, I didn't eat with them. I just snacked on the Pop-Tart that I'd stowed away in my backpack in case they ordered something that I wouldn't eat. Something to note is that her family was pretty religious. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they were fanatics, but they didn't allow their kids to watch horror movies or anything that was rated PG-13 or older. It didn't stem from the desire to protect them from something inappropriate. Sally's mother had an irrational fear that scary movies had satanic messages. We asked to watch The Purge, and her mom obviously said no. After some negotiating, she agreed to let us watch Hunger Games instead. After the movie, Sally and I went to hang out in her room. She put on some music, and being the age we were, we gave each other makeovers. By the end of it, we were looking much older than just 12 and 14. This part of the night is when things started to seem a bit off to me. Sally wasn't the most positive influence. Despite being my best friend at that time, she was manipulative and got off on putting me down. She had a habit of talking to men online and lying about her age. Sally showed me some text messages between her and the man that she was talking to. I can't give you an exact recount of them, but they consisted of him trying to convince her to meet up with him, and just the usual things you'd expect from a creep online. According to him, he was 19, tall, and blonde with soulful blue eyes. Once I saw the text, I asked if she had a picture of him. Something didn't sit right with me after seeing the messages. She showed me what he looked like, and he was very clearly not 19. This man was at least 40 and looked like he lived in his mother's basement. Then, we got a call from him. Sally answered without hesitation, and when I heard the voice on the other end of the call, I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're so pretty. Why don't you come meet me?" he asked. Sally said that she couldn't because she was spending the night with a friend. The mention of that sparked his interest. And then, he proceeded and tried to ask both of us to meet him. Sally, lacking any common sense, said yes. Thus began her plan for us to sneak out and walk 15 blocks to meet him in a deserted McDonald's parking lot. I didn't want to go. I was raised on stories of what happens to teen girls who meet random men from the internet in person. But after adamant pleading from Sally that she didn't feel safe going by herself, I agreed. We took our phones with us for the walk. I had a kitchen knife stuffed in my bra in case something were to happen and I needed to defend myself. The route we had to take to get there didn't have very many street lamps, and there weren't any houses. We were surrounded by trees on both sides of us. When we got to the parking lot, the only car parked nearby was a black beat-up 2000 Toyota Corolla. The car was still running when we got there, and from what we could tell, there was more than one person inside. The man from the picture got out of the front passenger seat and left the door open behind him before approaching us. I turned my flash on so I could see, and he was obviously on something. I can't tell you what kind of drug it was for the life of me, but his eyes were so wide that they looked like they were about to pop out of his head. He was jittery and kept twitching. I became very conscious of how big he was. Maybe 6'2", around 280 pounds. For reference, my friend and I did not look our ages, even without makeup. I'm about 5'2", and my friend was pretty tall, probably around 5'6" to 5'7", and we were both significantly smaller than him. The man reached out for us and caught my friend by the arm. I went to get my knife as quickly as I could, and that's when I saw his friends getting out of the car. He invited us back to his car and offered us booze and drugs, but after seeing my knife and that I was ready to call the police, he released my friend. I took Sally's arm and ran faster than I've ever had in my entire life. We took the long way home to avoid them finding out where she lived in case that they were following us. Once we got there, her family was still sound asleep. We locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and blocked him on everything. There wouldn't be any sleeping that night. We were constantly peeking out the window, and to our dismay, the same Toyota was circling around her apartment building. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. I never mentioned any of this to my parents out of fear of getting grounded or in trouble. I'm 16 now, and they still have no clue. I still get nervous when I see a car similar to the one from that night. As for Sally, her parents never found out either. We agreed to never speak about it again. Thankfully, she moved into a new house just a few weeks after that happened. Safe to say, Sally and I haven't spoken in 3 years. She was pissed at me for ruining her night, and our friendship didn't last for long after that. We had a pretty bad falling out, but looking back on it now, it was definitely for the better. So to Sally, thank you for teaching me a very valuable lesson and making me realize that some people are best just left alone. And to the man and his friends who tried to prey among 2 young girls, let's not ever fucking meet again.
One of the worst encounters in my life. Hello everyone. This story I'm about to tell you happened 3 days ago, and I have never been this scared in my life. I'm a French student doing a master's in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I live alone in an apartment in a building where there are only students. I'm 22, enjoying life peacefully. To give you a bit of context, I live in a calm, good neighborhood. The only noises I'd hear are the tram or parties in the building, since a lot of students are there. One night around 10 p.m., I hear a knock on my door. I live on the 3rd floor, and to get to my front door, you have to open the main door, which needs a key. Then you need to open the door to my corridor with the same key. So people who want to come to my door must have the key, call me, or ring at the door so I could open the doors for them from my apartment. None of this happened. I just hear a knock on my door. I usually open the door without a second thought, whether it's my landlord or a neighbor asking for something. As I told you, I feel pretty safe in the building, and I could also take care and defend myself in case anything happened. But this time, for some reason, I had a bad feeling about this. I didn't move at first. I thought the person would just leave. I'd finish my assignments. However, the knocking continued for 30 seconds. I said, "Yeah?" in English. The person knocking doesn't say anything. I say in English again, "Who is it?" The voice answers in English, "It's Uber Eats," which is weird because Dutch always speak in Dutch, and I recognize the voices and accents of everyone on my floor who have the key to access the floor. So, it wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't my landlord. It was someone claiming to come from Uber Eats. But the issue is, I didn't order anything from Uber Eats that day. The voice was unfamiliar. In case it's a prank or a neighbor pulling a joke, it was also a deep voice, at least 40, and probably a smoker. I replied that, "I didn't order anything, you must have it wrong." After a few seconds, the knocking continues, and the same voice says, "I'm pretty sure you did. I have an order under your name." I start panicking. I look around and pick up a knife in case he breaks the door because the knocking was getting a bit louder. I checked if my door was locked. It wasn't. I was literally 10 centimeters away from him. My front door was the only thing keeping him from me. And I'm glad it doesn't open from the outside. You need a key to open it even if it's not locked. I step back and I ask again, "What's the name?" He seems to be thinking for a few seconds. Then a final knock occurs. It was loud, and it translated some anger or frustration. Finally, I hear him going down the emergency stairs right next to my apartment. The steps were heavy, and the person was clearly in a hurry. I don't know what he wanted, or what would have happened to me if I had opened the door as I usually do. I still haven't understood how he got through the 2 doors. And why did he come specifically to the last apartment on the 3rd floor? Did he try others before? I posted a post about it on the WhatsApp group we have in the building. No one saw anything suspicious. No one opened the door for anyone. Anyway, I'm lucky for my instinct telling me not to open the door. And I'm glad I listened.
This happened when I was 13 years old. I'm a girl and in 8th grade, and the middle school I went to was about a 15-minute walk, so not very far. For context, my older brother and I grew up in East LA in a small house that had a metal gate, and both the front and back doors had a black metal screen door and a wooden door. During the day, we would always leave the wooden door open and have the black metal door closed and locked. Except this day. That day, I came home from school and had about an hour before anyone else would be home. I was really thirsty, so I rushed inside, grabbed a drink, and sat down at the kitchen table, which was about 10 feet away from the front door. I heard the metal gate open and was surprised, as no one should have been coming home that early. I got up to see who it was, and I saw an older man, probably in his 60s. He had a short white hair and a long white beard. He was wearing an AC/DC t-shirt, torn jeans, and sunglasses. I remember thinking he looked a lot like Santa Claus, but dirty and creepy. He knocked on the metal screen door and asked if my parents were home. Well, I was a dumb kid and said that they weren't. He got a smile on his face and said that he collected donations for needy children. I said I'm sorry, but I didn't have any money. He said sometimes children donated old toys. I said I didn't have any old toys to donate. He insisted that I must have some toys that I didn't want anymore. He was beginning to creep me out, and I noticed I hadn't locked the door when I came inside. I tried to keep my cool as I slowly and very carefully locked the door. I kept him talking so he wouldn't notice. A minute or two later, he wouldn't leave, so I decided I would pretend to check for toys, and then say that I didn't have any, so he would hopefully leave. I told him I would go check, and as I turned and took a few steps down the hall, I clearly heard him yank at the door, trying to open it. I didn't want him to know I had heard it, so I kept walking down the hall and into a room. I didn't have a cell phone, and the only phone in the house was in the kitchen. I thought about what to do and decided to stick with my plan. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I walked out hoping he had left. Nope, creepy Santa Man was still there. I told him I'm sorry, but I didn't find anything. He sighed and said all right, and that he would check another time. He left and walked across the street. I watched from the kitchen window, peeking through the blinds, as he just stood there, staring at my house for about 45 minutes. My brother and a few of his friends finally came walking down the street. As my brother came inside and his friends kept waiting down the street, the man walked around the corner and disappeared. I told my brother what happened, and he walked outside to look, but creepy Santa Man was long gone. When my mom came home, we told her what happened, and she called the police, but they said to call back if he showed up again. Thankfully, he never showed up. So, creepy Santa Man, let's not meet. Hi, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. If you want to send me a story to read, feel free to do so. My email is in the description of the video. And if you want to follow me on my social media, just to get updates or maybe to talk, the links and info for my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts are also in the description. And finally, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And turn that bell on to be notified for upcoming surprises. And remember, your fear feeds me.